"Sir, you're trespassing, and I'm making citizen's arrest on you." The words rang out across my ranch, uttered by a man standing firmly on my land, in the shadow of my boots. He spoke the line with a swagger that might have been humorous, if not so utterly removed from reality. I didn't budge, didn't smile, just stared over his shoulder, directly across to the barn, where two of my deputies emerged into the crack of dawn, their badges flashing the early light like a quiet warning. The man, preened out in his dollar store vest of fictional authority, hadn't picked up on the creaking of the back door of the barn behind him. He wasn't aware of the actual law creeping up behind him. His moment had arrived, but he was too embroiled playing sheriff to even realize it. All this commotion began last week, a day or so before sunup, when the stillness of my property was interrupted by the roar of tires driving over gravel. I was outside by the north fence, shoring up a post my mare had pushed out of alignment. The morning was crisp, the earth still half drowsy. I had just cinched the brace when a shiny silver SUV crept up the dirt road like it owned the place. "City people," I grumbled. "They seem to believe every open gate is an invitation for a weekend walk." That is when trouble first presented its face. Out came Marlene Whitaker, leash in her hand, two yappy designer dogs tugging on her leash behind her, her hairstyle like she was going to some charity gala. Behind the big sunglasses, she eyed my ranch as if it were going on the auction block. Then the door to the passenger side opened. Out stepped the actual headache, Vernon Tate. Clipboard clutched in one hand, mirrored sunglasses reflecting sunlight, and a badge so new you could smell the ego. He stood there as if he'd practiced the moment all morning. My stomach turned. This guy's watched too many cop dramas and believes he's beyond trespassing laws. I rested on my post hole digger, swiping the sweat from my brow and observing them walk through my gate as if it had been installed for their welcoming. Marlene marched right to me, phone already rolling. Vernon narrowed an eye at his clipboard, writing whatever made no sense. "Morning," I kept my voice steady. "May I assist you?" Marlene did not respond. Vernon did not lift his eyes. "Sir, we're here on official community business," he finally said. "We've received reports of non-compliant fencing and structures that violate Section 5D of the Rural Aesthetic Code. We'll need to perform a full inspection." Inspection! His voice had that rehearsed rhythm, like he'd been dreaming about saying that word for months. Then Marlene jumped in. "This land is under our extended HOA purview. Your ranch breaks the visual corridor of our neighborhood." I paused a few seconds, 3 perhaps, allowing their conceit some oxygen. "There's no HOA out here," I said, deadpan and direct. "This land's been private since my great-grandfather staked it. You're standing around 12 miles beyond your boundary line." Marlene bristled, as if I'd just insulted her whole family line. "Our revised charter now includes rural buffer zones. Your property impacts the integrity of our neighborhood." I blinked. "Visual corridor?" Vernon stepped up, pen held out like a weapon. "Sir, you're in violation of multiple ordinances, non-uniform fencing, barn paint that's not a neutral tone, and incorrect livestock containment. I'm issuing a compliance notice and setting a hearing date." And with that, he ripped a form directly from his clipboard, complete with a counterfeit HOA logo and some Latin that likely said, "We're making this up." I looked down at it, halfway impressed with the audacity, but entirely certain these two were a few steps short of sanity. "You do know there's a sheriff in this county, right?" I said. "Might be worth getting his opinion on your little hearing." Marlene let out a quick, derisive laugh. "We don't engage local law. This is civil enforcement." Vernon nodded as if they'd rehearsed that line. "I'll require your name." My smile was slow, intentional. "You're on Sheriff Caleb Thornton's ranch." "That's me." Vernon's pen hovered in midair. Marlene's phone fell an inch. Their faces changed, like their minds were just catching up to the error. Vernon cleared his throat. "That doesn't exclude you from regulation." I crossed my arms. "What it does is make this a criminal matter. You're trespassing. You're impersonating an officer. You're issuing fake citations. And you're filming private property without permission. That's 4 separate charges. Want to add more?" Marlene waved her hand like she was brushing away a fly. "There's no need for dramatics. We're simply upholding community standards." I took a step toward them. You're violating the law. I've told you to go. That's what you'll be pleading guilty to. Court. They retreated, though Vernon threatened that he'd be back with reinforcements. Marlene drug her dogs away, stormed over to the SUV, and kicked up a cloud of dust as they sped away. I stood there observing, chewing on the craziness of it all. I texted my deputy, Nate. He worked a nearby ranch. HOA clowns playing police again. Stay alert. His response was near instant. They came to my house last week. Just say the word and we'll shut it down. Didn't report it yet. I waited to make it official. Let them think they'd shaken me. Fact was, I knew they'd hang themselves in the end. I just needed to provide them with the rope. They returned the following day, more brazen than ever. This time they had backup. 2 new recruits in identical vests, marching onto my ranch like they were parading at the head of a procession. Vernon gestured toward my barn, yelling more gibberish about code infractions. And that's when he made his little citizen's arrest. What he didn't see, what they all failed to notice, was Nate and Deputy Leah Brooks emerging from the shadows of the barn, their hands resting on their holsters, badges gleaming in the early light like warning signals. Vernon spun around, saw them, and stopped in his tracks. His swagger dissolved in a split second. I cocked my head. You were saying something about trespassing? Marlene's voice broke, squeaky and tense. You can't do this! You don't know how this works. Nate snickered under his breath. Ma'am, you're the one that's got no idea where she is. The standoff throbbed with tension, their self-inflated egos quietly deflating under the demands of actual authority. I'm Caleb Thornton, sheriff of this county, and this ranch ain't just some dirt. It's a heritage, a fortress of values constructed by generations that bled and fought for every inch. Marlene and Vernon believed they could march in here with dollar store badges and bluffed-up clipboards. But what they stepped into wasn't some compliant pasture. It was a trap they couldn't out-talk or out-walk. The morning sun climbed higher, burning off the haze. But this showdown, it was just the beginning. They'd be back. I knew that much. And I'd be prepared. Supported by the law, this country, and a people who'd had enough of their abuse. The next morning, dawn arrived slowly and quietly. But I wasn't fooled. Peace is only the pause before the storm. And sure enough, at precisely 8:45 a.m., the dust rolled in once more. 2 SUVs this time, shining like models from the showroom floor, parading up the road as if they owned the entire son of a damn county. Stepped out Marlene. She was dressed as if going to a shareholders meeting. Vernon also still sported his wannabe enforcement vest, inflated with illusory authority. Trailing behind were 2 new faces, a wiry guy wielding a camcorder under a compliance crew cap, and a woman holding a clipboard thick enough to be a legal thriller. They breezed right past my gate, not even glancing at the new sign I'd nailed to the post. The new sign was plain and bold. Private property, sheriff's land, no trespassing. Didn't faze them. Vernon was still heading the charge, eyes fixed on my barn, muttering about emergency audits like it was of any consequence. Then Marlene's voice cut through the morning, loud and rehearsed. Under Section 6C of the Community Visual Preservation Act, this property is under consideration for critical aesthetic infractions. The woman on her left side, clipboard in hand like a shield, came forward. Sylvia Grant, she declared, compliance director. Then rattled off a list of offenses: fencing standards ignored, improper livestock containment, unauthorized color palettes. I stood on the porch, coffee cooling in my hand. You're trespassing again. That sign isn't a suggestion. Vernon gave a smug little grin. We're conducting an authorized inspection. You've refused to cooperate with HOA oversight. Then nodded toward Sylvia. She adjusted her glasses, standing taller. Temporary jurisdiction, HOA District 7 oversight. It was nonsense. Bureaucratic mumbo-jumbo covered with phony titles and fantasy enforcement. Still, they came on. Vernon gestured for the cameraman to begin rolling, walking towards the barn like it was their property. I stepped down, speaking firmly. Step across that line, Vernon, and you'll be breaking county law. Not some HOA fantasy you dreamed up. He spun, puffed up. You don't intimidate me, Thornton. The law's the law. Didn't have to respond. The barn door creaked open behind him. Nate and Laia emerged, boots heavy, faces stone. Vernon froze. The cameraman's lens dipped slightly. Sylvia's elegant pin fell off and landed in the dirt. Marlene gasped. Her dogs ran wild. Nate's voice was cool, almost teasing. Didn't expect you back so soon? Marlene stuttered, trying to rally. We're within our legal rights to make an inspection. I cut her off. No, you're not. You're trespassing again, pretending to be authority and shooting private property without permission. Then nodded toward the corner of the barn. You're on 3 cameras now. Yours, mine, and the department's. Laia advanced, hand-stroking her radio. Stay where you are. Keep your hands in view. Vernon's bluster fell apart. His flimsy zip ties clattered on his vest, useless. Marlene's voice rose a pitch. This is all a misunderstanding. Vernon told me it was legal. Sylvia rummaged through pages in distress. There may have been jurisdictional confusion. The cameraman, Evan, he claimed, held up his hands. I'm just a freelancer. Craigslist gig. I didn't know. Then Vernon backed into a corner and, stupid, made the blunder that brought it all crashing down. Sheriff or not, I'm detaining you for obstruction of community enforcement. And with that, he launched, zip ties clutched in his hand, desperation blazing in his eyes. But Laia was quicker. Vernon crashed to the gravel face first, cuffs snapping onto his wrists. Nate crushed the zip ties under his boot, grinning. Nice try, Marlene screamed, backing away toward the SUV. It's not mine. That's HOA property. Nate ran the plates. Expired. 6 months past due. This one's getting towed. Sylvia, ghost pale, backed off, palms raised. I was misinformed. I didn't know the compliance zone was in dispute. Evan held up both hands. I didn't know this was a sheriff's barn. Thought it was just an old shed. I knelt beside Vernon, his cheek in the dirt. You broke into a clearly marked law enforcement building, videoed it, and attempted to hold the sheriff. That's a felony list longer than your phony bylaws. Marlene's eyes flicked, her paper empire disintegrating. I merely brought coffee. Vernon orchestrated it. I rose slowly, voice as cold as frost. You arranged trespassing, assisted an impersonator. That makes you an accessory. Then another truck pulled up. My neighbor Laia Hayes leapt out, phone in hand and a smile on her face. Sheriff, this circus is live. It's viral already. Evan flinched. I didn't know it auto-uploaded. Didn't know the feed was public. Too late. Vernon's botched arrest, Marlene's breakdown, and the HOA's pseudo-authority were going viral. Get statements, I instructed Nate. Impound the cars. Call the DA. Vernon was loaded into a police cruiser. Marlene and Sylvia were split up and interrogated. Evan's camera was sealed. Now evidence. The ranch grew quiet, but the storm was far from over. This wasn't nosy neighbors. It was a marauding HOA, 15 miles beyond their reach, attempting to lay claim to land they didn't own and jurisdiction they didn't possess. By lunchtime, the web was ablaze. The video of Vernon's zip tie trick, named Zip Tie Sheriff, went over 200,000 views. Local bulletin boards were filled with memes. Marlene's scream was remixed into techno. Barry's badge became a punchline. In my office, Nate tossed me his phone. We're trending HOA Crusaders versus real sheriff. I didn't laugh, but the irony? That stung. This wasn't about fences or paint colors. It was about power, entitlement, and who gets to draw the lines in the dirt. Marlene's HOA was based in a gated suburb 15 miles away. No roots in this land, no right to claim it. But they went ahead anyway, believing a vest and a clipboard could trump history and grit. They were mistaken, and the world watched now. They'd attempted to claim rural territory, but their expanded zones were made up, a pretext to demand conformity. It touched a nerve. Arguments erupted. Were HOAs out of bounds? Was private property now open to urban regulation? The comments divided. Some applauded the dismantling. Others wept, sheriff overreach, disregarding the felonies. Marlene was held overnight in holding, her attorney racing to spin trespassing and impersonation into a misunderstanding. Her SUV was seized. By evening, her own HOA board removed her by emergency vote. Vernon accepted a plea bargain, no jail time, but probation, community service, and a prohibition on owning security equipment. His social media? Erased in a single night. Sylvia made a half-hearted apology. Fool me. But on the internet, her reputation was trash. Evan evaded charges but was memed. His Craigslist ad? Mocked brutally. The DA opened an investigation for fraud. It turned out their fake rural authority trick had been visited upon 6 other ranches. Fines, intimidation, bogus inspections. Now everything was falling apart. I replaced my warning sign with a hand-carved oak board, Thornton Ranch Sheriff's Land Cross at your peril. Lila dropped by, giggling. Subtle. A week later, I had a barbecue. Deputies and ranchers congregated under suspended lanterns, ribs smoking, beers clinking. Conversation turned to Vernon's stunt, the legendary zip tie showdown. Laughter rolled. A young deputy asked, "What if he'd run?"